This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'd like to give students a quick introduction to the textbook that we're going to be studying in the Academy's Classical Greek course. You can see the title page here on your screen. The title of this book is A Greek Grammar for Colleges. This actually is a Greek grammar that I began using when I was in college, and I've used it really throughout my career studying and teaching, and it's what's called a reference grammar. It's a reference grammar. And what that means, and this is important for students, this grammar book contains way more information than you need to study in order to be able to read Greek fluently. It's a reference grammar because if you do commit yourself to Greek studies in the future and you get more serious about it and you get more into the details of Greek studies, you're going to run into problems every now and then, and the problems you run into, the answers for them will not be found in most grammar books, but in a reference grammar you can find tons of information on the details of the languages, on changes of the language, on different dialects of the language and so forth. So this is a book that if you become familiar with it and comfortable with it while you're a beginning Greek student, you can continue to use it as long as you study Greek. So again, the title is A Greek Grammar for Colleges. It's a reference grammar, and it was put together by Herbert Weir Smith, who was a Greek professor at Harvard University. And this is a very highly respected Greek grammar and one that I very strongly recommend for students. So this is our text. Let's scroll down here, bear with me, and we'll take a look at the table of contents real quick and get an idea of how we're going to study this. You can see there's an introduction, and it talks about the Greek language and its dialects. That means the Greek language, but also throughout history and in different places, the Greek language is a bit different. So some authors will use a certain dialect and write at a certain time, and then other authors will be from a different place and writing at a different time, and you'll notice the Greek may slightly change. Well, in this introduction, there's an explanation of the history and the different dialects of the Greek language. So if you ever do run into that, you can look at this introduction and find some help understanding those differences. Then in part one of the grammar, you see the topic is letters, sounds, syllables, and accent. This is where we study the Greek alphabet and we learn how to pronounce the Greek language correctly. This study here in part one is known as orthography in classical grammar. Orthography. That's covered in part one. If we look at the subjects of part one, you can see we learn the alphabet, we learn the vowels and diphthongs, we learn what are called breathings or aspiration marks in Greek, we learn about the consonants, we learn proper pronunciation, different changes that take place in the spelling of words and why they take place. We then get into accent, how to properly read Greek syllables and words, and then lastly we learn about Greek punctuation marks. So all of that is contained in part one, which again is called orthography. In part two we begin the study of etymology. Etymology is the study of the forms of the parts of speech in a language, and you can see we read part two, inflection here. That means the different changing of the forms of the parts of speech. So we'll learn all about the different words in Greek and how their forms are changed to express different meanings. You can see we learn about noun declension up here. We go through all of the declensions of the Greek nouns. We then learn how to decline adjectives and pronouns. We learn about adverbs, numerals. We then go through all of the verbs. Many lessons on the verbs because we have to learn all their forms. So we go through all of that verb material. Then we enter into a second part of etymology, which gets into the formation of words. how words are formed in Greek. So part 2 and 3 together make what we call etymology in grammar. Then we study syntax, and syntax, the next part of grammar, is the study of the rules for constructing sentences, how sentences are formed, how ideas are expressed in a language. Now, we're not going to be learning how to actually compose anything in Greek, but it's still good to study syntax because it helps us to understand how to correctly interpret what we read. So syntax is used not to compose our own Greek, but to sort of unwrap the Greek that we read and make sure we get the author's meaning clear. The rules of syntax will help us to do that. So you can see the syntax of a simple sentence, the rules of construction for sentences in Greek. We'll then get into the rules of syntax for more complex sentences. We'll go through all the cases and understand how they're used in sentences. So all through syntax, the prepositions, the verb, the other parts of speech, and that will bring us all the way through to the end of syntax here, which is the third part of grammar. And then lastly, we'll finish up here with not too much in prosody, which is the study of Greek poetry, but we will get into a little bit of figures of speech. You can see down here at the end of the book, grammatical and rhetorical figures, and that will bring us to the end of the study of grammar. If you go on to grammar 3, Greek grammar 3, we'll use a different text for the study of prosody and the rules of poetry reading. So that's a quick overview of Smith's Greek grammar, which is the textbook we'll be using in Greek grammar studies in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Now to move on here, you'll notice this long introduction, and as I said, this is sort of a history of the Greek language. You may find this interesting, and you may just want to skim through it and see if there's anything in there that gets your interest, but it's a history of the language, how the language differed in different places and at different times. So if you, as I said, if you move on in Greek studies and you're reading Greek works from different periods, let's say, for example, you're reading Homer's Iliad, which was written around 750 BC, and then you're reading the New Testament, which was written in the 1st century AD, the language is going to be a little bit different, so it's important to understand the changes and what the differences are so that you can correctly interpret it. That history and explanation of the dialects is explained here in the introduction of Smith's grammar, which, as I said, as you get more advanced in your studies, you may find it helpful to come back and read this. So that's the introduction. You can see there's just tons and tons of information in this grammar. This is a list of other works to consult on classical Greek grammar, some abbreviations that are used throughout the grammar textbook, and then we come to part 1, which is our first lesson in Greek Grammar 1. And you can see that this first lesson teaches us the Greek alphabet. Now, I've created a separate set of videos where I go through the alphabet in great detail, and if you're just getting started in Greek, if you're a younger student and you'd like very easy, clear guidance through the study of the alphabet, I recommend those other videos, and I'll post those videos in the course lessons. But for here, if you're an older student and you'd like to sort of move through this a little more quickly, you can simply study this table and learn everything that you need to learn about the Greek letters and their pronunciation. So just to help you understand this chart, you can see up top it says the Greek alphabet has 24 letters. You can then see on the left side here the uppercase letters listed on the left. These are all the uppercase Greek letters. You can see the figures of the letters and their names written in Greek, which you probably can't read yet, but transliterated into English. So you can learn the names of the Greek letters by looking at the figures and then looking at the transliterated forms of their names. And again, all of this is explained in the How to Read Greek videos that are on the Academy YouTube channel. You can search for them and find them there, or you'll also find them added to the Greek grammar course page. So you see the uppercase forms of the Greek letters, then the lowercase forms of the Greek letters, the Greek names of the Greek letters, transliterated into English so you can read them. You can then see an equivalent. It's compared to, I don't know that I would say an English letter. I guess they're intended to be equivalents in English, but sometimes the equivalents are actually Latin letters. But it compares the Greek letter to a letter similar to it. And then in the last column, you've got some simple examples of words to help you understand the pronunciation of the Greek letters. So for example, the letter alpha, it's similar to the classical A, and you can see there's a short form and a long form. The short form would be like the first A in aha, aha. You can hear that short aha. And the long A would be pronounced like the A in father, father. You can see that it's a longer vowel. The letter beta is like the B in beg. The letter gamma is like the G in go. The letter delta is like the D in dig. And it goes on through all of these different examples to help you learn the pronunciation. Note that there are a couple examples that come from other languages. Like here we see an example from French. And we learn the sound of the eta, which is just but it's long in length. And that's to compare with epsilon, which is short. So there are examples there of the pronunciation and sounds of the letters. And like I said, some of them can get a little tricky, like the upsilon. Again, I explain this in detail in the How to Read Greek videos, so it's not that big of a deal. But you've got all the information that you need to learn the names of the letters, the figures of the letters, their English sounds, and so on in this one chart. So as I said, if you're an older student and you'd like to try to get through this pretty quickly, studying the chart might be enough for you. But if you'd like to dig into it a little more and get some more detailed help, there's a whole series of How to Read Greek videos that you can watch to help with that. So that's the first lesson, article number 1 here, the Greek alphabet, the figures, the names, and the sounds of the letters. If you go down to the second article here, you'll notice it's just a little historical note. The Greek alphabet, as given above, originated in Ionia and was adopted at Athens in 403 BC. So there's lots of historical and linguistic information which you should really just skim through. Occasionally you'll catch something that's interesting, but it's not required for our Greek grammar course. But at the same time, there's lots of interesting stuff. Here, for example, we learn that in the ancient world, before 403 BC, Greek was written entirely in uppercase letters. So this is what ancient Greek would have looked like, not like this, which is what we'll see in modern Greek books. This is what Greek would have looked like, all uppercase letters. That's an important historical fact. And there's loads of historical information in these lessons. So we have Article 2 there, then Article 3, which talks about a couple letters that were present in ancient Greek that disappeared. And again, if you study more ancient Greek literature, understanding these details might be helpful. But for us, normally we're interested in the classical period of Greece or in biblical Greek. These things really don't have any impact on our studies. So that would be the content of Lesson 1 in our Greek grammar course. And I hope that gives you an idea of how we're going to study this textbook. As I said, not all of the information needs to be learned, and I'll be sure to tell you in the lessons what's crucial to be studied and memorized and mastered, and what you should simply skim through for familiarity. But that's how we're going to move through these studies in Greek Grammar 1 in the Academy. So that's the content for Lesson 1. You've got a quick overview of how this textbook works, And my advice to you is to simply study the articles that are assigned in each lesson, watch any videos that are included in those lessons, and then use the assessment as your study guide. So if you're not sure about what to study or how much you should study it, open the assignment, read through the questions, and you'll see what information is most important and what's less important. I think that'll be a helpful guide for you. If you have any questions about the Greek studies, any questions at all, post them on the student forum on the course page. So go to the Greek grammar course page. Up at the top of the page, you'll see the support forum for students. Post any and all questions you have on there, and I'll make sure I help get answers for you. But anyway, good luck with your studies of Greek. Ask any questions you have, and I promise you that if you work through this book with me, you'll be able to read classical and biblical Greek fluently in no time. So get to work. Study this lesson for yourself. Complete all of the lesson tasks and assessments, and we'll move through this together. Note also that you should be studying Greek Reading 1 as you get started in Greek grammar. That's where you put all of this grammar knowledge to the test, and you'll see examples of everything that we study in Greek grammar in your Greek reading lessons. So I hope that's a helpful introduction. God bless your studies.